Unashamed and Afraid, a show unashamed about sexual addiction recovery and unafraid of coming unto Christ for healing, where we share real recovery stories, learn from experts, and share resources that actually work. So join us in being unashamed and unafraid.
Dave, how are you?
Good.
Good to have you on the show. Thanks for coming.
Good to be here.
So,
Wait, what about me? You didn't say hi to me, James.
I was getting there, Chris.
Oh, okay.
I'm literally turning my head saying, so, Chris.
I was just making sure you saw me.
Chris, I always see you.
Sweet.
I love you. All right. And thanks for busting my chops. It's great. So, Dave, we have a common friend, Sherry Christensen.
Yes. Yep.
So Dave's a fellow podcaster. He and Sherry do a podcast together called
Two Therapists Talking.
Yeah.
It's really creative, I know.
Right. And so we've had Sherry on our podcast before. We've known her for a bit. She was an earlier podcast. And so if you want to check hers out, scroll through the stuff, or I'll find it and name it here in just a minute. Somebody's going to find it and they're going to text it to me while we're talking, Dave. So episode 42. There it is, Sherry. Love you. See you. And so people can find you at Two Therapists Talking.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. So what do Two Therapists Talking talk about on Two Therapists Talking?
A lot of stuff, actually. Therapy.
Okay.
Mostly focused on sexual addiction, betrayal trauma.
Awesome.
And everything that goes along with that, right? So disclosure.
Oh, fantastic. So good. So we are like soul podcasts here. That's awesome. So for you, like as you're, living in the sexual recovery land and the betrayal trauma land, and what's a topic that, like, say you've just done like 11 sessions back to back, and then you're like, I got one more. I got a little juice in me left that I'm just like, man, if I could just talk about one thing that just gets me excited, even after 10 sessions or 11 sessions all day. What's a topic that just you wish that you could just shout it out to the world so that when people came to your office, you could talk about something else? Or the one that just lights you up and you're passionate about? Either one. Pick that.
Yeah. I like that question. It would be empathy, love, shame, kind of that relationship, but love for sure. Leading out, yeah.
Leading with love, leading out with love?
Yeah.
Okay.
Helping people to feel loved.
Feel loved.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying people don't feel like they're loved when they're in their addiction.
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we can all relate in so many ways.
Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. We're going to go there then. Let's go there. Before we do, really quickly, just kind of paint yourself into context. Tell us a little bit about you. And
yeah, so I grew up feeling, we moved around a lot. There was a lot of uncertainty. I found a lot of safety and security in being perfect and managing everything, being in control. That was kind of how I coped with that, and had a lot of challenges. Same stuff, you've heard with clients and guests and everything. Suffered a lot from just not feeling good enough, not feeling, like I really mattered, and didn't really think I need to go into therapy or anything, but I love psychology. There's not a lot to do with that, really. Teach high school maybe. So I went to graduate school, became a therapist, and before I even graduated, I got a job as clinical director of an adolescent boys treatment center. Wow. And so in graduate school, it's like, well, what's your niche? Like, we know what that's going to be, right?
Right.
Depression, anxiety, I don't know. But then I got this job at this place for sexual addiction. Okay. And I was not thinking sexual addiction was going to be my thing, but went there and learned a lot about it and loved the boys. And it was an equine program, super cool.
Awesome.
Loved it. And so I've just been doing it ever since.
And for our listeners that don't know what equine is, what is that?
Well, they can go and listen to Julie Forbes' episode
that we just recorded.
Just did. So you can check that out. Or, in a nutshell,
It's using horses to do therapy work.
Yeah.
Because horses they're great for energy.
Yeah.
And other programs use dogs, but horses are just, they're really big and intimidating, and it's kind of a different thing. So
yeah, it's a very cool form of experiential therapy that can be really profound and create a lot of thought-provoking experiences for those doing that.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
So they had a lot of that in there.
Yeah.
Yep, we had a lot of that.
that.
That's where I was introduced to lie detector tests as part of the recovery for these boys. Often it was, court ordered and things, and so
Court ordered that they'd have to do the lie detector test.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we would do that a lot, and when I transitioned away from this treatment center to just private practice, just brought it with me, and so was one of the few that was, when I did this, advocating for doing it as part of recovery, and it's been really helpful. So,
Tell us how.
So
it's not something we utilize here, so just kind of
and lie detector tests is different from polygraphs, for example. Polygraphs are your traditional, you think of a movie and they hook you up to wires and things. Sure. There's a company, Converus, they do eye detect. It's all eyes. And so it's way less invasive. You just rest your chin. That's the only thing that really is touching you. And it just reads your eyes. And it's really cool. It's a little bit more accurate even, which is nice. And they're much shorter tests. But we would utilize this in the process of disclosure where, let's just say, for example, a husband, is discovered to be in an affair, or maybe pornography has come out, and there's a tendency to just share what your spouse knows and not a lot more than that. And so when you bring in this idea of, okay, as part of disclosure, we're going to utilize a lie detector test. If you're ready, when you're ready, you don't have to, obviously, but this is kind of the process. It always brings more information out, in my experience anyway. And the point isn't even to just sort of force them to be honest. The point is to help them get back to just living their values. Where it's like, I talk integrity, I talk honesty, but I really want to reconnect to that. And so building trust is secondary. That's cool with the spouse, very nice too. But really it's about, having the peace and the confidence that comes from just everything's out. And people still love you, and it's going to be okay, and life goes on. And so we found it to be really helpful.
So how early in the stages are you doing things like that?
Really
Because
early.
If it was me in the beginning of that, I would have been like, oh, hell no. Like,
That
I am
happens.
not doing that.
I kind of feel like I can almost tell who's going to be like, that is a great idea, and I'm never going to see him again. And I get it. You got to be ready for therapy at all, much less something like a disclosure. We try to do it as early as we can because we're trying to work our way into couples, and we're not going to ask, these wives or husbands to risk trusting or choose trusting without some kind of disclosure process first. And so as soon as they're ready, we do it because we kind of see it as like early stage. Let's get through disclosure, and then middle stage is, lots of empathy and talking and working towards building trust again. And so the sooner the better, but just depends on when they're ready.
When they're ready.
Because we're not going to force, we're not going to, like,
big,
what are we going to do?
I'm like, big caveat there. They got to be ready.
Yeah.
Because if that's not like safe for them.
Right.
Those are the ones that are like, nope, peace out. I'm never coming back here. Right. So what do you do to, I guess, create enough safety that they're willing to give that a shot?
Well, it kind of usually comes after some shame work.
Okay.
We want to introduce this idea. Really, the biggest concept for me, I think, in therapy is increasing someone's sense of self-worth, right? Like if we're doing anything, hopefully that's what we're doing first. And so early therapy is helping them to consider themselves differently than they have before. Kind of trying to trademark this move. You can't see it, but I like to think I put my hands together and I separate them, and this represents this separating who you are from what you do.
Yeah.
And, everyone's caught up in what I do is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Well, and I think a lot of betrayed spouses go there too.
oh, for sure. Yeah.
They're like, that's all they see is the action, not the person.
Right.
And that I mean, just being in this practice, just seeing so many families, I shouldn't say families, but relationships destroyed because that's all they see. They're not seeing the individual and the person that they really are. So it's really cool to watch where they actually are like, I'm separating the two.
Yeah.
And that's where some real impactful healing actually happens.
Yep.
Right. So I got a cool quote actually, and it hit me yesterday, right, as I was kind of looking through some stuff, and it said the majority of men are only valued for what they can do instead of who they are. Thus, those around them, and including themselves, believe their entire existence is performance-based, right? So they really, it gets ingrained, I think, in a lot of us, and it's not unique to men, it's
Right.
women as well.
Right.
But we really become human, you've heard the human doings versus the
Right.
human beings.
Right.
And so people end up being valued for only their behavior, what they bring to the table, and so often it's worded in like therapies where it's like, my husband only wants me for my body. My wife only wants me for my paycheck.
Right.
It's this sort of objectifying of it, and this all of a sudden your relationship isn't a relationship, it's a transaction. Right.
Yep.
And so it's learning to your, I'm different than what I bring to the table.
Yes. And if that doesn't happen or we feel like it's happening, we don't really approach disclosure yet.
Okay.
Because they've really got to be able to separate, this isn't who I am, this is what I did.
Yeah.
Right.
And
even the person that's doing the like the sexual acting out,
Right.
they have to separate that
Yes.
as well.
Yes, definitely. Otherwise, it's like, well, why would I go and share all my worst stuff that I was going to take to my grave and just be alone the rest of my life and totally rejected? That sounds fantastic,
Right.
Way.
Yeah.
So we definitely have to get into the shame work, you could say,
Mm-hmm.
first early, but when they're ready. And usually they come around pretty quick.
Yeah.
Because they want to help their wives to feel better and they want to do good things. And so it's like, okay, kind of like they need to chew on it for a bit. And then,
Yeah.
So why do they usually not want to disclose? I know the answer, but I want you to speak into that.
Well, there's usually information that wives don't know, and it's not like deal breaker information. It's just hurting them more because now it's like more that they didn't know, and they've already been trickled truth nearly to death already. And so it's like, oh, well, there's this stuff that I was really hoping to never have to share, which is fair, very
Right.
hard to do. And so we prepare the wives as well where, whatever comes out in this process, we need a good 90 days where you're not going to make any decision to divorce or leave as best you can, obviously,
Sure.
Right.
But because they've got to feel safe to
Yeah.
share some things that they don't know yet. And we're working on the wives for the same thing, right? This describes his behavior, not who he is.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, this is, I don't know if you noticed, this is called Unashamed, Unafraid here. So, and you're talking about we're spending a lot of time at the beginning with some shame work. So if say we're picking up a new listener here and they're like, ooh, what's this unashamed thing? I'd like to be unashamed. Like, kind of tell me, let's describe for them, like, what could that process potentially look like? What is, just briefly, like, here's what shame does, here's its impact, and here's how we can move into shame resilience or de-shaming or unashamed.
Well, because the reason why I asked that question of like, what is it that's keeping them from sharing that is the shame that they feel.
Right.
Right. So how going to what James was asking.
Yeah, well, that's what we're trying to do
Right.
all day, every day in therapy, right?
Right.
Is bring them out of shame, which is just a sense of worthlessness, and bring them into you are worth it, you are loved, you are important, and more than you know. And I like to prove it to them. You think, well, how do you prove this? Well, so I'll ask them, and they're very honest at this point, right? And I'll say, hey, I appreciate the honesty. Like, let me ask you a question. On a scale of 0 to 100, first number that comes, just say it. This isn't for a grade. 0 to 100, what do you feel you're worth? And, they're coming in at a pretty low point usually.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll go, you mean like how, like maybe God sees me? I'm like, just how you feel, just whatever that means to you. And it'll be, 50, 40, 30, maybe 70.
Usually under 50.
Yeah, it'll be low. And I'll say, that's fine. There's no wrong answers. I'll say, okay, you got to kind of slow it down.
Yeah.
So 48 years ago, 57 years ago, you were born. I want you to imagine a hospital room, and here you are, newborn you. You're like the size of a loaf of bread, little hands, little feet, little toes, teeny tiny, perfectly groomed toenails. Just imagine newborn you for a minute. Just sit next to you and look at you. I'm like, okay. I'm like, okay. Can you imagine newborn you? And they're like, yeah. And often they'll get teary.
Yeah.
Because this is like I don't really ever do this, but I'm feeling something. And I'll say, okay, same scale, 0 to 100. What do you feel newborn you is worth? And it's 100, like every time.
Mm-hmm.
So like, okay, 100. Well, newborn you isn't doing anything. They're like, huh. Well, potential. I'm like, oh, that's fine, but newborn you isn't doing anything. In fact, newborn you is dependent. Like, I leave you on the hospital bed, you won't survive. Well, they haven't done anything wrong. I'm like, okay. So when they do, that drops? Well, no. And every once in a while, you'll get somebody that's really sad who's like, 0 for newborn them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is usually like, adoption or something. But you can transition into, their children or their favorite person. And it's 100 for them every time. And I'm like, well, when they started throwing fits or looked at porn at 12 or something, that must have dropped then. You think less of them. Well, no. And so they tell you 100.
Yeah.
And so you have this in now where it's like, I didn't tell you what to say for newborn you. You feel that. Your problem is you grew up and came to believe that, you weren't attractive enough or popular enough or athletic enough or smart enough and therefore not good enough. And they can all relate to that.
Right.
But they also said 100 for newborn them. So I
Right.
use that, and I'm kind of, that's proof that it's bigger than what you do, or it would have been less. And so I go back to that. And then, a big assignment that I love, because I'm really big on homework, like handouts, like every time we meet.
Right.
And one of the most important assignments early on is affirmations. And so it's
Okay.
like head up, shoulders back, in a mirror, eye contact, out loud. First thing you say is the most important thing about you, and that is, I am a beloved son of God. Like your power is your identity. It's not what you do. It was never about what you do. Can't be, on your best day. It's not about what you do. That's your power. Somebody else's strength is what they do.
Mm-hmm.
That guy's name is Jesus, and what he did was pretty amazing, and he was perfect and stuff, but that was his strength, so it doesn't have to be yours. Yours is just who you are. And hard to receive, right? But you use all these exercises and the newborn thing and affirmations, and in time, pretty quick, they begin to say, okay, yeah, this makes sense that I'm separate from what I do. I'm worth it. I'm lovable. And then we try to ease into the work, like disclosure or whatever from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome.
So as you watch people do the shame work, what's something that you find that might keep somebody just hung up, where they're really not turning the corner? They struggle to lean into an affirmation or lean into really putting into some practice, some shame resilience exercises, or thought patterns. Have you noticed that? Are there certain things you've noticed that might keep somebody from really turning that corner?
Oh, for sure. Nobody turns the corner for a while.
Right.
In fact, it's kind of a running joke. I tell them, you're going to be really uncomfortable with this.
Yeah.
Do it anyway. I mean, you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you're like, I love you. Like, no, I don't.
Yeah.
All I see is your faults and flaws and weaknesses. I mean, everybody struggles with this. And I say, do it anyway. Keep going. And, there's a lot of CBT where we've got to, go through, what are you thinking? Are you challenging the belief?
CBT is
cognitive behavior therapy, right? So It's like, one of the best things you can do is you learn to recognize situations that make you feel bad. And then what was the activating event? Something happened, and the belief about yourself is always failure, inadequacy, whatever.
Not good enough.
Not good enough. Do you challenge the belief? Are you actively challenging the belief?
Yeah.
And saying, hey, even though, this is my favorite phrase, right? Even though I yelled at my kids, even though I didn't pay this bill, even though I looked at porn and masturbated again, it's like deep breaths are so important in this process, right? I'm okay. I'm still worth it. Yeah. I'm like, are you at least challenging that? And it's going to be hard to believe. But often there's just so much big stuff that it's like, we're looking at EMDR, we're looking at ART, really big interventions to go back to these really shaming experiences and try to lower the distress.
Got to kind of resolve some of the trauma really first before that to reset that core trauma that likely planted that deep shame identity.
Yep.
Right.
Yep, exactly. So it's like a lot of everything, right?
Right.
You're doing affirmations, you don't really believe it. You're doing, ABC or CBT, and you're starting to come around to it, but we also have to be looking at, okay, where did this start? What's kind of the beginning of all this? And 0 to 10, how does it feel when you think about it? Oh, like 9, 10. You're like, okay, we gotta get into that.
Yeah. And
hopefully all of it combined, and then over time, they really start to come around.
Yeah.
And it's awesome.
Yeah.
And they go, hey, I've been doing this for 6 months, and I was doing affirmations today, and I believed it. You're like, yes.
Yeah. It's like, hallelujah, you got there.
Yes. Yeah.
So going into that, like, what is that like for you when you see them turn that corner and you see them just like step into their true identity of who they really are? What is that like for you as a therapist to watch?
It's the greatest experience of my life.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, there's some good ones. Maybe I dialed back a bit. I've had some good experiences, but it's the best.
But it's cool.
It's awesome.
It's so cool. It's what makes all of it worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So you talked about empathy before.
Empathy. Yeah.
Yeah. Powerful concept. Talk to us about empathy.
Misunderstood concept.
Yeah. So talk to us about empathy.
Yeah.
The misunderstood, just all the things. Get on your soapbox and preach, brother. Tell us about empathy.
I often think understanding empathy is knowing what it isn't more than what it is.
Great. Let's go.
In other words, empathy is not problem solving.
Right.
It's not fixing.
Right.
It's not telling them why you did a thing.
Uh-huh.
It's not comparing your spreadsheet of facts to theirs and pointing out what's different. So empathy is perspective taking, staying out of judgment, feeling emotion, sharing emotion.
Yeah.
Mostly it's just you staying out of shame, or you won't be able to stay in empathy. And this is the hard part, because phase 2 is like, you think post-disclosure, we're asking for some trust to come in, and wives are like, oh, it's so hard. Like, absolutely it's hard. And he's still got to show up and demonstrate some things. But if he can learn empathy and get good at it, it's like the key that unlocks every door. Like, I'm convinced. And so it's like,
okay, so that's a pretty big statement.
I know.
So I'm listening here. I'm a new listener, or I've been listening for like a year or 5 years, and I'm like, I don't know if I do empathy, dude. Dude, if you're telling me that's the key to unlock a lot of doors, like, get me there. Tell me how can I do that?
You almost have to go into the conversation like this is an empathy conversation. You can't pull it off in every conversation.
Yeah.
This is like special. This is like formal, kind of.
Okay.
You're gonna
Take
have
some practice.
Yeah, for sure. Because we're pretty good at like listening and saying, oh, that's hard. Empathy is more than that.
Okay.
So empathy.
So show me some empathy. Like, give me role play with me, an empathy dialogue. What does it sound like for you to give me empathy right now?
So empathy is I'm totally focused on you.
Okay.
Like, it's not about me at all, which is usually one of the things it isn't, is it switches to being about me.
Yeah.
So you say like, you had a hard day at work.
Okay.
I'm like,
all right.
Me too.
So Dave, I had a rough day at work today.
Okay. Well, I want to hear more about that. What happened? Tell me about that.
Had a session with a client, and they had a big setback, and then they blew up at me about it, like somehow like it was my fault that they made these bad decisions. And then my daughter came in to clean the office and was talking about all this this stuff she was having with some friends, and just a lot of things kind of came at me today that was a little blindsided me.
Okay, blindsided you. So you felt overwhelmed. Did you feel like you were helping?
I think it, I guess for my daughter, like, I just felt bad, like that she was having to struggle. It's not fun to watch my kids struggle. And then with the client, I felt
unseen,
unappreciated, maybe.
Unappreciated, yeah, 100%. Like unseen, unappreciated, and not good enough. Like, made me feel like I wasn't good enough.
Okay.
Yeah, so that probably, I mean, I imagine that feels really heavy, like what you're doing isn't making a difference. Maybe you think, you're wasting your time or their time, and that would be really heavy. Like, I think probably sometimes you feel like you should be doing something different, or there's more you need to learn. Kind of like you're not good enough, or you're not doing the job you want to do. Is it like that?
Yeah, kind of.
Mm-hmm. What else is it like? Because you're not content with kind of,
okay.
Right? This is one of the challenges. In
Okay.
fact, I'll say rate it. Like, does it feel like that's how you feel? Do you feel like I understand how you feel?
Okay.
Kind of. I'd be like, okay, 0 to 100. How much?
Okay, so let's say we got to 100. Then
Okay.
what?
Okay. So this is important, because this is where a lot of people will stop, right?
Okay. Dude, you nailed it. 100%. That's it. Okay.
And so 100. Okay. Now I share how I feel about how you feel.
Okay.
Not about what happened or like what I think about what happened. Nope. That's still about me.
Right.
We want to stay focused on you. So
Okay.
I share that I'm really sad that today was so rough for you. I think about you a lot, and I want the day to be good for you. And that's sad that maybe you were feeling that alone. Like, I want to be with you. It kind of breaks my heart that it was so hard for you. You're important to me. And so it's kind of like, okay, now I'm reassuring them that I can feel what they feel. Their body has to pick up on that, right? And I'm still not done.
But you actually have to be sad.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because you might
You can't
just
say
be
it
like,
and not be
wow,
it.
that was a rough day. That sucks. Well.
And they're going, your energy's terrible.
And
their body's going,
no, you're not actually sad. You're just saying the words.
Which I hear a lot, for sure. Because the handout is pretty specific. I mean, guys want like checklists, step 1, step 2, step 3. And wives say, well, he's just saying what he's supposed to say.
Right.
I'm like, that's fair. Attitude and energy is usually the difference. So pay special attention to attitude and energy.
Okay, and I do want to name, like, someone who's been living in addiction. Like, often they're and this was my experience, I was cut off from my emotions.
Right.
And so I couldn't even like feel my own stuff, let alone feel like your stuff.
Right.
And so I just want to kind of put it out there, guys, like, and gals, that if you're listening and you're like, that sounds really hard, it can be. It is.
That's why I said it takes practice.
It does. And you got to like it, and that's why we kind of harp on it a lot on the show. It's like you got to tap into your emotions and learn to feel what that feels like, and recognize that your emotions aren't your enemy, that, they might be uncomfortable. You might even call them painful, but they aren't going to hurt you. You're not going to die.
Right.
And in the end, actually having an expanded emotional self and being makes you actually more alive, more human. It brings color and vigor into life, and it makes you a relatable, empathetic human being. Right.
Yep.
So I feel sad for you, genuinely. I love you and I care for you, and it does make me sad to be, in this relationship with you and knowing that somebody I've cared about has suffered today. Then what?
Here's what I want for you and why.
Okay.
I want you to have.
No, that's not making that about you.
No.
What
you want for them, right? So
okay.
what I want for you is to feel safe in this relationship, to be able to trust me, to be intimate emotionally with me.
Okay.
This is what I want. You could say for us, maybe if it's about the relationship, but it's not always about them, right?
Yeah.
If they share an experience that's about the other person, like you're a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, so this is about me pretty directly. I can tell you're really angry. Tell me more about that.
Sure.
Well, we don't start there. When we
Right.
start into this process, it's like share something from childhood or from high school that was embarrassing.
Right.
And then it's easier for the listener to stay out of shame, which is always going to derail this whole thing. So it's like, let's start
stay
small.
out of the shame and making it about themselves.
Right.
Right. Oh,
Right.
you're talking about me right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's when defensiveness comes in.
Right.
Right? I mean, that happened numerous times when I was in the beginning stages of my recovery, is I would get defensive. And until I started creating empathy and actually listening and then repeating back to Autumn what that was like, and so you're angry because I'm starting to understand her, and then I'm not like taking it attaching it to my shame anymore.
Yeah.
And then I'm able to actually step into empathy.
Yeah.
I love this. This is like so awesome that we're talking about this.
Yeah, totally. That's why it's
Well,
easier
and
to identify it.
I love slowing it down and breaking it down.
Yeah.
Because you're
Totally.
right. The practice of empathy is so powerful in relationship and having a mature adult relationship.
Yeah.
But not only to have a relationship with another person, but you need it to have a relationship with yourself. And addiction is often I have fragmented from myself, and I don't want to be in relationship with me because of my shame. Because there's often a component of self-loathing, right? And that self-contempt will show up, or just depending on, everybody wears it a little differently. But I don't want to be in a relationship with me, let alone I think I want relationship with other people, but I don't, right? Like, it shows up, the evidence is everywhere. Okay, so you're saying, and it doesn't end there. So
No, it doesn't end there. I mean, this is why this is often like, I'm telling you, when we're done with this process, the wives or husbands will say, this is like the most understood I've ever felt.
yeah,
So you share what you want for them and why, and then you do a do-over or a redo. Like, if I could go back and do this over again, this is what I would say, this is what I would do.
sure,
And then it just like cements it. And then
yeah,
I say, final step is touch. Some kind of physical, like give them a hug.
with permission.
With permission.
Yep.
But they'll be down every time. I mean, you do this process and follow these steps, and they just feel really good about whatever issue they chose to talk about. Because it's all structured. I mean, it's like step one, who's speaker, who's listener. You identify this right in the beginning, so there's no confusion. The listener isn't the speaker, so they don't get to halfway through say, well, how do you think I felt?
Right.
That's not what this is.
Right.
So just follow the steps, and people need that.
Yeah. So let's briefly go through the steps. Who's listener, who's speaker?
Yep. Step one, who's listener, who's speaker. And you commit to doing this process with good intentions.
Yes.
Because sometimes we start it and I'm like, wait a second, you guys don't have good intentions.
Right.
I got to put that in the instructions too? I thought it was clear enough. Okay.
Okay.
So step one, who's speaker, who's listener. Okay. Step two, speaker shares, but there's rules. One issue, not everything that's ever been hard for you in the relationship. We get empathy fatigue and we can't track everything. We get worn out. So it's like you choose one issue and you talk for 2 or 3 minutes. That's it. You say a lot in 2 or 3 minutes when there's no getting cut off or anything.
Okay.
Step 3, listener restates what they heard, but using emotion words. So you want to focus on feelings and emotions. And even if they didn't share any, you imagine what they would be feeling. Great. I imagine it's probably like this, or maybe it's like that. Step 4, you ask if they feel understood. Mm-hmm. And if they do, you say, great, how much? 0 to 100. Well, 90. Well, guess what? That last 10% is always the most important part. It's like, okay, well, what am I missing? And then they share a little more and you listen and then restate again. And that's always so valuable.
I like that. Like taking it a little bit deeper.
Yep. Yeah.
There's the piece that's missing.
Yeah.
And then they may not know that.
Awesome.
Yep.
Okay.
Because they're just like, oh, yeah, this isn't bad at all. So, yeah, sure, I feel understood. I'm like, don't let them off easy.
Yeah. Okay.
So step 4, if they feel understood, you move into step 5, which is you share how you feel about how they feel. Great. And again, all about them. This isn't about you. Step 6 is what you want for them and why. Step 7, redo or do over, like if I could go back. And then step 8 is some kind of affection, touch. And they're going to be open to it.
Yeah.
If you've pulled this off, it's like, it's really good.
Yeah. So meaning if I could do this over, that's like if I'm the one that had the hard day and I'm saying like, if I could do today over, my daughter wouldn't have come in and had a sad day.
Well, it would be like if it's about me and I could do it over.
Great. So if I was mad about you,
right,
then I'd say,
if you're the listener and I'm the speaker, you would say, you know what I would have done differently? Here in this conversation or before I left or when you said this, I would have said that. Something that shows them that not only like do you understand, but you like have a real desire to just better meet their need.
Make repair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they love it. They love it when it's like, you know what I should have done? I should have done this.
Yeah.
And like,
it's making
you really
repair.
do get it.
It's being accountable, right?
Yeah.
It's owning up, accountable, because there's so much power in accountability and ownership. So much power. We need to do a whole episode on that sometime.
Yeah, there really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no healing without it. So
Totally. Yeah. And there's so much individual personal power that comes from accountability and ownership. Like huge. So anyway, awesome. So we got some empathy, we got some shame, and then bring us back to love is this all encompassing. And you started talking about, overall this power of loving self. So wrap this all together now, tie it all up.
So it's usually within the first session or two that I'll pull out this, newborn worth thing. And it comes back always to this sense of you're loved just because you're you. You're not anybody else. You're unique. You're incomparable. And I use that 100% a lot for them when they struggle because they told me. Right. And it's like, okay, so not because of what you were doing or what you've done or what you were going to do, you were just worth it. And honestly, if I did another podcast, it would be like the gospel, therapy, and near-death experiences. So I've been way into near-death experiences. And this is like, people pass and come back and they describe this love that's so overwhelming. This is what I'm trying to recreate somehow in some way in my office. And a lot of it is
without almost killing anybody.
Yeah. And thinking you're going to bring them back, right? But like they come back and they describe this overwhelming love that you're the only one. It's like there's God and the universe in you, and all of his love and adoration and affection is all you.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do for them. And they haven't felt like unconditional love, total acceptance in a long, long time, maybe ever.
Right.
Just because it's you. It's like, well, if I do, I'm like, no, you can't. That's not what this is.
Yeah.
And so that's why, for me at least, number one in therapy is increase their sense of self-worth. And if you can just even start them on that path, everything else kind of will take care of itself in time.
Right.
But it's all about love, for sure.
It's magic.
Feeling it, which isn't easy because I reject it. And it's like, no. I'm like, oh, how do we get through? And then you got to get creative.
Yeah, we sound like 60s hippies now. Love is
love,
the answer.
all you
love,
need.
Peace and love. Yeah. But for reals, I'm with you. Amen. It is love cures the ills. And it is amazing the power of just living out of acceptance and God's love and being accepted for who I am as a human being.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And that's what we talk to a lot in boot camp is just understanding finally how much God actually loves you and that you're worthy of being loved by him regardless of what you've done.
Yes.
Yeah. So
exactly.
Dave, I've got a scholarship for you for the next upcoming boot camp. Would love to see you there. So getting the thumbs up from the group out here saying yep. So listeners, love you, appreciate you. We are so grateful that you follow us on all the things. I'm not as good at naming all the things as Steve is because he's got it all memorized. And
Instagram, Facebook.
Yeah, I never have to say all that.
Unafraid.
Yeah, give us the 5 stars on iTunes anyway. If you need a scholarship, you go to our website. You'll find one there. If you need some help, email Jeremy or Chris or wherever. Dave, so if somebody's out there listening, they're like, dude, I'm jiving with what this guy has to say. Where can he find you?
Addo Recovery. It's probably kind of familiar. You've had Dr.
Yeah.
Skinner on here and stuff
Yep.
before. Yep.
Skinner's awesome.
He is. Yeah.
He's a good dude.
Good dude.
Awesome. Okay, Addo Recovery.
Addo Recovery.
Go ahead and
Awesome.
find you there. Awesome. So join us in the bonus content where we will deep dive into some more of this stuff with our friend Dave. And in the meantime, stay unashamed.